Hey folks, a viewer of my channel asked me if I could look at their KitchenAid stand mixer and try and get it fixed. The problem is when you turn it on, you notice this isn't turning. Let's turn that back off. If you watch my channel at all, you know that the vast majority of the stuff I work on is what my bubby would have called nicht gefährlich, which is kind of loosely translated from Yiddish, meaning not wonderful. But the KitchenAid stand mixer is one of those things. It's just a beautiful design. It's been around a long time. It's been used in professional kitchens. They rarely have problems. This is the sort of thing that you'll be able to hand down to your children one day, unless they get their own, at which point they'll be able to hand it down to their children. Anyway, we're going to take this thing apart and see what the problem is and get it fixed and up and running and back to the person. So stick around. I'm going to go grab some tools. I think I say this every video, but the first thing you're going to want to do is unplug the power. I don't want you hurting yourself, and well, I don't think you want you hurting yourself either. The motor and the gearbox for this unit are housed in this assembly up here, and in order to get to it we have to remove it from the base, and there are 4 screws under here we're going to remove in a second. But before we do that, I'm actually going to remove this pin right here to remove this assembly and then this ring as well. And the reason is there are, I think, 6 or 8 screws that hold this all together, and it's just a little bit easier to remove them standing here because you get a little more stability from the base. So let's get to that real quick. I'm going to do something that would have driven my grandfather crazy. I'm going to use a screwdriver to gently tap this ring off. And that comes off. And then you may actually have to run this a little bit to get access to the pin, because you know, if it's in the wrong place it's going to be harder to hammer. Now I'm going to take this punch, and you may end up having to, buy one at the hardware store if you don't already have it, and a nice size hammer. And we're going to put it right in the center of that pin. There. And then that pops out. And now we will sort of gently massage that off, if you want to call it that. And it takes a little persuading, but it will come off. Ah! Okay, we're going to use a screwdriver to pry it off. And that's what that looks like. There's some grease in there that we're gonna clean out and replace when we put this all back together. So the next thing we're going to do is remove the base, and as I mentioned, there was the 4 screws here, and this is probably, at least physically, the most difficult part of the job, because these screws are pretty large and they're in there very tight. I loosened them before, but there's more than one way to remove the Purkinje fibers from an emu, so you can use a big screwdriver, but the problem with that is, at least the one that I have, doesn't go in very straight. So you'll have trouble getting to it. You can use a screwdriver on a socket. This is a flathead, but they do make a Phillips head, and that will allow you to get in here and get some good torque in here. You could also grab the big screw with a pair of pliers and twist them. It would work, although you do run the risk of marring up the side of the screw. We got those out now, and this should slip apart. There are some little pins that hold it all together and align it with the top, so you may have to, persuade that a little bit as well. And so now if we look at the bottom, there are 5 screws. I was wrong. I think I said 6 or 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there's 2 screws here and 2 more screws here. So we'll remove those. The unsung hero of this kind of work is your cell phone camera. Take a lot of pictures of this thing at every step while you're taking things apart. A good example from this machine is that this actually has 3 different lengths and sizes of screws, and if you take a picture of them as you're taking them out, you'll know where they all go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to remove the back, which is just 1 screw. This will pull off. And there are 2 more screws here and here. And then this will just kind of pull off. Be careful, this is a bent piece of metal, and it is just decorative. Well, I guess it has the numbers for your speed control, but it now gives us access to a couple of more places where we can stick a screwdriver or something and pry the two halves apart. Be gentle with this. You don't want to mess anything up. And the two halves will gradually, or so I say. There we go. That wasn't painful. Now look at all the nasty grease in this thing. So I went and grabbed some gloves and a rag that I can throw away when I'm done, because there's so much grease in this thing. I mean, just take a look at this little glob here. So let me wipe this off. We have some options here. If you're doing this at home, you could just take a paper towel and try and wipe as much of this off as you can. The one thing you never want to do is drop the electrical part, which is the part with the motor with the cord going in it and all these wires. You never want to drop this in anything liquid. You can saturate everything with, well, particularly water will shorten everything out, but even cleaning compounds can cause some issues, wreak some havoc. So we can just wipe this out very well, which is probably what I'm going to do. And then for this half, because it doesn't have any electrical parts in it, I actually have a parts cleaning machine. This is what the cleaning machine looks like. And then it sprays a solvent from this trough over to this. And you can take a brush and clean it off. And you see how clean it's gotten it. So it works pretty well. As I said before, though, you do not want to use this or any kind of liquid solvent with the electrical part, with the part with the motor. You really can do some serious damage to it if you do. So you can see I used a fair amount of paper towels, and throw those over there. I got this pretty well cleaned up. It's not perfect. I got most of the grease out. This is the little part that sits on the bottom that spins the paddle. I got this cleaned up as well. Here's the bottom that we were cleaning in the parts cleaner, and you can see really super clean. The problem is, and I'm going to take a closer picture of it, but this gear is made of plastic, and it just wore this section of plastic out. Maybe something got caught and it stripped it out, who knows. We're going to remove this part of the transmission. There are 3 screws that hold it in, and this will come out. And you can actually buy this entire mechanism to replace. So it's the gear and all this metal part you can buy together. I decided to go ahead and buy just the gear, just because I thought it might be a little more interesting for us to just replace the gear. And they do sell it. This is about twice as much as this. So we're going to take this apart and fix it. Here's what this gear mechanism looks like a little more close up, and you can see right here the gears are really worn down. What we're going to do is we're going to knock out this this pin right here. Goes all the way through. So we're going to use a punch. We're actually going to use a smaller punch because it's a smaller pin. One of the pains in the booty about this, and one of the reasons you might consider buying this entire mechanism, is that we have to hold this still and this still while trying to hammer everything out, and this is just going to move around, so we have to be pretty careful. I'm going to use a larger punch to get this thing started. Hold it like this, tap on it. Another thing you want to be careful of is if I keep hammering down with this pin and push it down, it's actually going to hit this back wall right here, and it will bind everything up, and we may not be able to get it out at all. So we need to push this out in a direction where it can come out completely. So I'm actually going to set it like this to drive the pin out. And this is going to be even more of a pain in the booty. And we'll just gently tap on it until, there it comes. The pin came out. So here it is. Now that we got that out, we'll pull our punch out, and this should hopefully come apart. And that is a big hopefully. If it doesn't come apart quickly, we can certainly put there we go. Force the punch in this way. And now this gear will pull out, or this pinion, I guess we could call it, and this will pull out. And notice there are a couple of fiber washers on here that we'll have to put back in. Here's another side by side of what it should look like and what it does look like. So you can see that's pretty badly torn up. So the parts washer clearly didn't get out all the grease, and I wasn't really expecting it to, honestly. And in fact, here's another part of it, the part that that we put in the parts washer that also didn't get all the grease out. You can also use a screwdriver or a pick or something to get some of this tougher grease off of these parts. One thing I want to mention about why we need to take the old grease off is because the old grease has got all the shavings from this gear, and they're suspended in the grease, and it can form an abrasive, actually. In addition to the gear, I also ordered this specialty grease. It says it's for KitchenAid mixers, although I'm sure I'll find some other uses for it, and then a gasket kit. They're all available online. Another thing we want to check for once we get this all back together is that this hole and this hole line up, so that these two line up, and then when we put the pin in, everything will go together. If not, we're going to be hitting into the side of this metal and it's never going to go back together. Now we're going to put a little bit of grease on the shaft. You don't have to go crazy, just get a little lube on there. Going to put a little bit of grease on the fiber washers and also on the surface of the gear. Looking in the hole here to make sure that everything's lined up as well. Slide this pinion in. And I'm looking in this hole to get a pretty good sense of when everything is relatively lined up. So it is sort of lined up there, and that's why we're going to use our punch. Sort of shuck and jive to get that lined up. I'm going to push that in there, and I'm going to take our pin set, or our punch. And we are back together. The top of this pin is pretty even with the top of the surface of this gear. Everything turns pretty easily. This is sticking out a little bit, but that's okay because it was before. And this is all back together. I'm going to put some grease in the gears because that's ultimately going to be helpful to our machine running smoothly. Our next step would normally be to just reinstall this onto here. This is the assembly we had in the parts washer, but I'm actually going to take this gear out and clean it up a little more. It's probably not strictly necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway. There is another fiber washer here. There's also a little O-ring here, which I think just keeps any of the grease that's in these gears from leaking into your food. But anyway, with a little bit of twisting and turning, we can pull this out. Actually, I take that back. There's two fiber washers on here. We don't really need to take, sorry, I had that off camera. We really don't have to take them off because all I'm trying to do is just get a little more of this grease off. Get this grease off. And then I'm going to put some of our special monkey grease on this shaft, on the bottom of the gear, on the fiber washers. Slide that, oops, a little bit of the yucky grease. Slide that back through. Slide this back on. And then now we're going to put this back together, or this back on rather. These screws don't have to be super tight, but they do need to be tight enough so that they don't vibrate out when the machine's running. So I'm going to put some grease on, more grease on this gear. I'm going to put some grease on this gear. Just, if they're teeth, put some grease on it. Similar procedure on this. This is the gear that goes into this hole to run the KitchenAid accessories. I put some grease on the shaft, put a good amount on the teeth, Slide that in. We want to put some grease on this gear right here. It's called the worm gear. And that's the gear that meshes with these teeth here. We want to put some grease in this bushing down here where this shaft goes. The one thing we don't want to do is put some grease in here, or any grease in here. We're going to take our new gasket. We can put a little grease on that too. It maybe will help it seal a little better. And we will align everything. And hopefully, if things go well, slip everything back together. However, are you going to fight me? You are not. Good. I went ahead and went downstairs and grabbed a mallet so that I wouldn't mar stuff up. Now we're just going to start putting the screws back in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5 around here. And remember, they are different screws. One thing that happened that I wasn't expecting, and I'm going to share this with you guys so you can avoid this, is that the gasket shifted when I put all this back together, so the holes don't line up around the gasket. And what I'm going to do is just, actually I probably don't even have to take the screws all the way out, just loosen them and pry it back apart again like we did before at the beginning, and just move this around until everything does line up. And let's see if that'll work. We need to pry this side too. And yeah, it looked like that worked. So it's a pretty easy fix. Just wanted to show you that. Just make sure everything's lined up. So we have all this back together. And I went ahead and plugged it back in because I wanted to test the motor and the gear system that we replaced before we put everything back together. It's pretty easy to get this back apart. Once we get this back on, it becomes a little more difficult, not impossible. If you're going to do this, keep your hands clear of this section of the machine. This is where all the electrical is. Just make sure that you're protected. Now I'm going to turn the motor on, and it seems to work great. This is turning without any problem, so I'm just going to continue on, and we're going to continue putting this thing back together. And if you remember from the beginning of the video, I took this part and this part off while it was still on the stand because I thought it would be easier, and I stand behind that. But I think getting it back together, it's going to be easier to do it off the stand. So we're going to smear some grease in here, some on here. Just make sure everything's pretty well greased. Greased? Which is it? We'll slip that back on. And I'm going to use the same trick I used with the other pin, where I use the punch to align the holes before I bang everything back together. I had to turn the camera off because I couldn't find my little punch. Anyway, I think we're lined up. And then we'll kind of do this. Get everything as lined up as we can. We'll take this pin right here. This is the pin that we took out of the beginning. And this one, looks like it's in pretty good shape. Shove it in there. And then we will tap it in. And it doesn't seem to be going in, so we'll take it back out. This part of the repair ended up taking a lot longer than I thought it was going to. The reason is it's kind of hard to get everything aligned and held in place and hammer. And I probably would have been better off putting it back on the base and then installing this part, but hey, live and learn. Anyway, I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to sit through several minutes of me struggling, but we'll come back in a second. Finally! Well, that was a royal pain in the booty. But we did get it on. We can clean it up a little bit, of course. These are the sorts of things you run into on this sort of job that you don't really anticipate. We'll go ahead and put this back on, this little ring, and this is just a friction fit. I am using the mallet because I think it does a better job for getting it on. So we are in the home stretch. We're going to put the base on, which, if you remember, are these 4 giant screws. Giant may be wrong, but big, certainly. So put those on. And these were the ones that were difficult to get out because of just their position. So these screws have to be relatively tight because they hold everything in place. So you're really going to have to find a way to tighten them. And I think I said before, the socket wrench with the Phillips head, although this is the flathead, with a Phillips head bit on it would probably be your best bet. You could get the most torque. I may be able to get this going good enough though. Those are nice and tight. I'm kind of surprised at how good I can do with this offset screwdriver. There we go. That's good. We're going to put this strap back on. Now this has, I think they call it a strain relief here, that fits into a notch right here so that it looks pretty. Make sure you get the wires tucked in the machine. And the back here actually has some little pins on it that go into some notches beside there, beside the plug. That can be a little bit of a bugaboo to get a line, but we'll get it done. Put the little screw in the top here that holds it on. Yeah. Of course, we'll need to clean it up a little bit and put this back in its proper location. But honestly, we're pretty much done with this thing. Let me plug it in for you real quick and we'll run it and see if it explodes on us. I think we're good. First of all, I'm going to turn that off so it isn't annoying. I'm going to let this run for a while just to make sure everything is, seated and in place. But I think we're done. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a good holiday, because this is a couple of days before the holidays. And hope to see you again. Like, subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff. Thanks again.